Bienvenidos. Welcome to another episode of The Brown Perspective. This is your host, Romero, and I'm here with my co-host, Eduardo. ¿Cómo estamos?
Estamos bien aquí, listos y preparados, ready to hear the underground perspective on some exciting work happening up in the Bay Area.
That's right. We are very excited to have with us today Samuel, one of our very good friends that's doing important work out of Oakland in terms of community organizing and fundraising. He works with Unite Here Local 2850, which is East and North Bay's Union for Hotel, Food Service, and Gaming Workers. And is also a volunteer with UndocuFund SF, which is how we recently linked up. So I thought it'd be good to bring him on the show today and have him talk to us about the work that he's doing, because he's literally on the ground talking to people. He's hearing the stories. He knows how this whole COVID situation and lockdown is affecting the most vulnerable in our community. So definitely important to give someone like him a platform where he can shed more light and inform a lot of us as to what's really happening and what's going on. So welcome to the show, Samuel.
Hey, what's up, compas? Thanks for having me on. Thanks for putting some time aside and like making a whole conversation, a whole piece about what's going on in the Bay on like all the topics that you just mentioned, right, Romero, and yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, why don't you, before we get into the UndocuFund, because I definitely want to talk about that, why don't you tell us just briefly how you ended up in Oakland, and then how you also came to work at Unite Here, and maybe a little bit about what you do with this organization.
Well, I'm originally from LA, from South Central. Went out to, after finishing high school, went out to Humboldt State University for about 5 years. And that's when I really started doing organizing in a general sense, organizing in community, organizing with students. And then by the time I was in my last couple years in school, I was looking for work, just in any type of movement that was out there that was hiring. I really didn't have an idea or know what an organizer was, let alone a paid organizer. I always had the idea that those were volunteer work. But then by the year 2014, I was able to get a job doing some canvassing work and doing some restaurant work in the Bay Area, in Berkeley in particular, in Oakland. And then from there, I gradually started officially organizing with fast food workers for about 3 years and a half. And then after that, after 3 years of that, did a year of retail work, organizing with retail workers, in like mall shops of like the East Bay, which is in Emeryville. And then about in 2017 is when I started organizing with the hotel workers and restaurant workers of Unite Here Local 2850.
I'm pulling up a map of Oakland right here just for reference. I'm sure you guys cover the entire area, but do you guys focus predominantly on Oakland, or does your work also expand to San Francisco and other areas?
So particularly for Unite Here Local 2850, it covers most of the entire East Bay. So if you zoom out a little bit, it will cover, let's say, that we have some shops in the Richmond area, which is the Contra Costa County, Concord as well, and going down to let's see, Fremont and Pleasanton. We have a couple of hotels there, and we also up in the North Bay, which is San Rafael area, but going up a bit more north, we do have a couple more hotels as well. One in Santa Rosa, we're about to have two in Santa Rosa, and one hotel in Petaluma, California, which is going up to 101.
When you guys organize a strike or a protest, you're always there on the ground with the people that you're helping organize, correct?
That's right. So it's a team of us, right? It's a small local, at most like team of 5 to 6 of us. So when there is, let's say, when you mention something like a strike in one particular hotel, is we all do put a hand in it in terms of, making sure the picket lines are going, workers are coming out. But there's going to be the one person that's always bottom lining it is the main rep of the shop itself.
And can you tell us a little bit more about, because you mentioned there's some hotels or existing properties that you're working with and some new ones that are coming on board, but how do you get those hotels to, or the workers in the hotels to sign up to the union? And actually, I remember that back in the day, my mom, I grew up in the East Coast, and actually Unite here was trying to organize her factory. Unfortunately, they were not successful, but I know that it involves getting the workers to agree and to say that they want to be part of the union. Is that still the case? How it works?
Yeah, yeah. Good question. Exactly. So, in the end of the day, right, it has to be a decision the workers make, the majority of the workers, right? So, let's talk. We could talk about one particular campaign that I'm working on right now that just recently went public. It's a courtyard in East Oakland, about 53 workers, and yeah, I mean the campaign started about a couple years back, where it would be me waiting at a bus stop where the workers would get off the bus and get on the bus to get to work and go home, and I would just be there with a clipboard or there with like just trying to have a conversation with them and seeing how the working conditions are and asking folks if there's an opportunity to make real change, would they take it? And from there, just keep following up with folks. And, keep following up. And one of the main things we do that is by doing home visits with workers. We come to really realize quick that you can't have real conversations about working conditions at work when you're right outside their workplace, where someone can see them or think that they're being watched or what have you, right? But when you are invited to someone's home, right, it's where they're most comfortable and where you can have real conversations about what's going on, right, when we're talking about the workplace and what are the things that we can change in the same time.
When you're out there with the clipboard and trying to talk to people, I can see a lot of apprehension for people to talk to you, especially, like you said, if you're doing it very close to their job. Do you find that you're able to establish contact and then evolve that relationship with people to the point where you get invited to their home so they can tell you about the working conditions? Do you find that that's organic, that you're meeting them for the first time and you're doing all the work? Or to what extent is the reputation of Unite here already established and well known in that area, so that if you tell them I work with these organizations, they already at least have some knowledge, even if it's not personal, they know someone else that you guys may have helped out, so that it makes it at least a little bit easier for you to talk to them?
So I would say, taking it back a bit, on just thinking of like where the workers coming from, right, and what I've seen in the past like 5.5 years organizing in the Bay is, one, like most folks know about unions, right? They hear union, they know generally that it's good, it does something, it gives some type of benefit. They don't really know how it works, right? Don't know how you could like get one, or if you can even be a part of one, due to like status of like of immigration here in the U.S., right? And then second, we're talking about also workplaces like big corporations of hotels, where they spend a lot of money just making it very like taboo to mention that in the workplace to begin with, on on just anywhere around the workplace, or to talk to your coworkers in general. So one of the things that I was taught organizing in labor through unions, right, different methods of unions, is really trying to have a short conversation, right, if I'm happen to be right by where their workplace is at, and the goal is not to try to convince them to have a union at that very moment or be a part of one, but the goal is to talk to them about how can we continue having a conversation to make real change in your workplace, right? Whether that's more of a wage, whether that's better benefits, better hours. We wouldn't know that yet until we have a sit down, deep conversation. But if they're interested in even talking to me about that, Usually, what I always do is get them to sign like a card that says, "Oh, you support that, and can I have your basic information, which is your phone number and your address." And then right off the bat, I just go the next day to, or whenever they say they're off, to their house and knock on their door.
I know you don't have like you guys probably don't even ask for any of this stuff, but you get a sense of the undocumented versus documented workers. What do you know? What is the breakdown?
I would say like in these hotels in general, of like these courtyards, these Holiday Inns that are like about 50 to 80 workers, I would say if not half, more than half of housekeeping in particular are undocumented folks.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge.
And the one particular thing that sticks out here in the Bay is that the Bay, it's a very diverse area of folks from different Latin Americas, in particular here of like folks from Guatemala. There's a lot of like recent arrived Guatemalan folks here, and one of the first jobs that a lot of folks get is either cleaning homes, right, where they know someone who's already has a business like that, or they'll get a hotel job as a housekeeper.
Mm-hmm. And in general, what is some of the resistance that you come across? Not just from the people that you're trying to engage in conversations to see if something can come of it, but also from the establishments. You already mentioned that there's a lot of propaganda within the business itself to vilify or to portray unions in a negative way. Have you ever had any actual personal issues with those that run the establishments that you're trying to help the workers unionize? Like if they find out that you're trying to talk to their members?
Like if I get a pushback from the companies themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we dealt with like, I mean, if me personally have like ever gotten direct calls from them or emails from a company, no, not yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I could say that coworkers of mine for sure have gotten calls, or has gotten like a manager / like a member of the owner has gotten like one of their workers to call one of my coworkers who's organizing another shop and trying to like fish information out of them, so we could they're trying to figure out who's like who's leading this like group of folks to try to organize the union.
Right.
They're trying to figure out who of their workers is
right, got it. Not you guys, like who on the inside is also stepping up to organize, of course. Yeah.
Right.
That would make sense.
That's the main thing that I took out that I'm learning a lot from this union, right? It's like really, as an organizer, really focusing your time in developing workers, right, to become committee, which are worker leaders, so they could be able to organize their own coworkers themselves, right? And I mean, yeah, that's like the general goal, at least for myself as an organizer, is like, for me, it's for a worker would be developed well enough to be able to push me out of a job, so that they could continue organizing their fellow coworkers, right, in one shop and in the next shop, and continue different campaigns and growing the union.
Right now, I would think that with you guys, if, like you said, mentioned that some of your coworkers have received phone calls or maybe even emails, I would think that those are just intimidation tactics, because with you guys, you're working within the legal boundaries of what you can do to try to help people organize. But I would think that if they discover who the leaders are that you guys have been communicating with, especially if they're undocumented, then they can easily fire them.
Right. Exactly. And even if they're not, like, we will hear stories of just crazy shit of what these companies would do, just to find a reason to get someone fired. And a lot of the times you don't really need that much of a reason to fire someone. Like, all these workers are at will, right? Yeah. So they could fire them whenever they want.
So that's the risky side of what you're doing, because you're trying to help these people and you're trying to help them organize, but ultimately if depending on the job and if the business finds out that they're the ones that are organizing it, they usually go after the leaders. These guys, they could get fired. Have you ever come across that situation where people were fired because they were suspected or known to have been talking with you guys?
Yeah, that just recently happened about a month ago with the campaign that I'm organizing right now.
Yeah, how do you guys
Um,
handle situations like that?
well, this is very special situation, right? Because we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Hmm.
Um, so so
Which
generally, when we're ready to, okay, so if we want to take a couple step backs on when is it that the workers are ready, right? When is it do we know that the workers are ready to like be able to, as we call it, go public to their company that they're organizing a union, right? So we try to control that, right, going public, so that we could have some time to be able to, make sure that we have our leaders right in the shop who are organizing their coworkers, and make sure that we are able to speak to the majority of the workers in the shop, right, so that they can know what's going on, what's the plan, and they won't be, intimidated when the boss does try to come after someone.
mm-hmm.
So once we have the majority of the folks, what we generally do is, when we're not in the pandemic, right, we go up to a hotel with as many workers that we can get from that hotel to come with us anytime before they're working or when they're not on the clock, and present to the manager a petition, right, saying that, we the workers come together to organize to make changes in this workplace, right, and we want you to recognize this as a union, just something simple as that. And they give them a petition filled with all the workers who will agree to that, and usually that's from there it's up to the company what they're going to do, right, whether they recognize the workers or whether they don't. And usually they don't, they always want to fight it, and one of the ways they fight it is by firing folks, right?
Mm.
So in this particular case, folks were already laid off before we went public, right, because the pandemic happened in March. The shelter in place, I'm sorry, happened in March, and a lot of folks got laid off from the hotels. So they were told they were going to go back to work, right, when the business comes back up. And then by May, we got to majority. People signed up saying they want to be a part of this, make real change in their workplace. Um, and we sent an email out to the company about on the Monday, sometime mid-May, and 2 days, 3 days later, the company responded by emailing every like 90% of their staff saying that they're fired because the company supposedly has no money, and you pretty much using the reason of the pandemic that they're all getting fired.
Right.
So we're currently doing two different plans right now, right, to make sure that workers get back to work, right, when the business is back up and going, and also for workers to vote for the union that they're organizing for, right. And one way, of course, we filed for an election under the NLRB, which is the National Relations Labor Board. And then we also filed a ULP, an unfair labor practice, against the company because we're seeing the firing of 95% of their staff as a retaliation because they're organizing for a union, which is their federal right. And then the second way we're also creating pressure on the company is by, right now we're in the middle of trying to pass an emergency ordinance here in Oakland that's called the right to recall.
Yeah, and I have the page up right here because
Right.
you got it. So you guys got some media coverage for that as well.
Yeah. So that's another way that we've been creating a lot of pressure, not only with the company but with the city as well, because I am only focusing on this one company as my campaign, but we're talking also about thousands of workers who are suffering in the same way of being laid off and then also being fired as a result of companies saying that it's because of the pandemic, right? So this ordinance, what it would do is that once it's passed, any company in Oakland, any big corporation in Oakland will have to call back the folks that they laid off prior to the COVID-19 in order of seniority, right? So that means that whoever has been working in this one company the longest would be the first person to get called and working down that list.
The amount of work that you guys are doing, especially for this community that needs the assistance, is just, it's commendable that you guys are out there helping. Do you guys get support from the broader community, or do you find that it's usually just within very isolated or siloed or restricted to the people for the company that you're working and maybe their family members?
No, no. I mean, there's a really big community support here in Oakland. We work with like several different like community groups, that really, yeah, just really throw down, when the call is out to either participate in phone banking, right? And when we're trying to phone bank city council members to make sure they vote yes on this new ordinance, or we're trying to get them to send emails or make public comments during city council meetings or via Zoom right now, right? To make those comments in support of these ordinances or similar ordinances that the union has passed in Oakland in the like years prior. And then when we have actions, for example, this past Monday, we had a caravan action to raise up that awareness of this ordinance, and we had about over 100 plus cars come through to be a part of that caravan, where we ran the program where one of the workers who in the courtyard of the campaign I'm organizing with was able to speak right in front of these hundreds of people, so that they could be aware of like what she's going through and what her family and her coworkers are going through, right, in these past 4 months of them not being able to work, and still expected to pay rent and all their bills on time.
That's powerful, and I know you sort of talk about some of the complications or new dynamics that COVID-19 brings to organizing, and obviously social distancing and more of the virtual engagement tactics that you mentioned. But it's also, then there's a combination of what's going on around racial and social justice. How are those two phenomenon impacting your organizing or conditions on the ground?
So conditions in terms of like to be able to continue to do the same work.
Yeah, like how easy, how hard is it? Do you feel like there's a little bit more appreciation? Because I think, and part of it, and I know the hospitality industry was one that was hit, but obviously there's a greater appreciation for how essential these workers are, and the fact that that they are an important part of the local economy. So just wondering how all those realities and things that are happening in 2020 are impacting you all right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with the local and the union, the international union itself, right? Like, because this union's entirely representative of hospitality and food service, it's been a big hit. It's been a big hit. Our local has gotten, I think, still up to 90% of the whole local has been laid off of the workers that we represent. And due to that, also from the staffing, a couple of my coworkers have been laid off as well because no folks are able to pay their dues right now, right? But a lot of that's the one thing that I appreciate about this local too, because although folks are laid off, although right now myself as part-time, we believe in the work so much, right, that like we can't just stop it, right? Like, this is not a job where you can just do 80 hours and call it a day, or a full 8 hours and call it a day. Like, in order to be there and like go down with workers, like you gotta be there, no matter what. But in the other sense of like how harder it has been to organize, has been a bit more challenging, right? Because usually the vast majority of the work that we do as organizers is meeting with people in person, right? Or going to home visits, right? Workers visiting workers at their homes or at their workplace to be able to like have those conversations. But it's been, in that sense, it's been challenging. But in a sense too, it's just been an opportunity to show, just señores and señoras how to work Zoom. Like, I can't see them in person, but I show them how to download an app and how to push a link so they could just open up a video call with me. Meanwhile. And being able to be more on top of like getting each other, calling each other back on the phone calls, and being more precise on like our time management of it, so we could keep this moving a lot more quicker. And yeah, I think in that sense it's still been working. It's been pretty successful. I think I saw that success when this action came up this past Monday, because I have about nine workers of this hotel that I'm organizing with, and each of them were able to turn out a handful of their coworkers that I've never met myself, that I never visited. And usually when we turn out folks for actions, like we have to ask folks like 3 or 2 times, right? So they won't like try flake out on us and forget about it or make a plan. But it really goes to show on how much these lead workers, right, worker organizers in the courtyard have been stepping up so they could make sure that they achieve their dreams of like, making that they have enough money to have a home in the next month, right, and being able to provide for their families, and in the end of the day, have that union to have really good benefits for them and their family.
Sounds like you, like so many of us, like so many other industries, have pivoted to virtual, and I guess some of the call and all that regular organizing. So,
And can you talk a little bit more about what you're seeing with the personal stories of people that have been affected by this? I'm reading this article here based on the protests, and someone was asked when we asked her if she would be okay to pay rent this month. She answered, "Not this month. Este mes no tienes para pagar." No. I suppose this is the reason why you're volunteering also for this UndocuFund, because a lot of the people that you've been helping to organize, they're the ones that are being affected the most. So can you talk a little bit about that, the personal stories, and then your work here with UndocuFund San Francisco?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, with that story that you were just pointing out is from Elena Sabi, who is one of my strongest leaders in the courtyard, and yeah, she's a mother of 4 kids, living in an apartment in East Oakland, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure that everyone in Eastern Cali would know, right? The Bay Area is a very expensive place, and Oakland in particular has like been skyrocketing for like the past couple years, just in comparisons of like the rent, what it was like, yeah, when I first moved in here. But yeah, right now, like you could find an average apartment right now in Oakland, for like maybe, if you're lucky, $1,000. But an average right now is like 20, like I'm sorry, 1,200 to 1,300. Not include That's probably not including utilities neither. Um, but but yeah, that's one thing that's happening. There's another worker right now, and that's Elena's coworker who currently went homeless in the middle of the pandemic. Right, she had 2 hotel jobs. She lost both of them, and right now she's living with 2 of her kids in one of her friends' living room, sleeping on the couch. And yeah, I've been in touch with her for the past, pretty much on every day for the past week since that happened, so we could try to find different resources for her to apply to, that for here in particular for Oakland folks. Luckily, I was able to find a couple of applications that were still open that are giving out funds for workers, and I helped her apply, and hopefully she'll be able to get that soon.
Those applications are with other programs, or are they related to UndocuFund San Francisco?
So that's a little bit that's different than the San Francisco one. The UndocuFund SF is specific to SF workers.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Oakland, there's an East Bay UndocuFund, where it's compiled of like, it's organized by different community groups, right? And usually it's one group that bottom lines like how to give out the money, how to clear people, right? Needing just like, let's say, volunteers to make those phone calls to workers to make sure that they're a real person, that they really work somewhere they're saying, right? So it's different based on, at least in the Bay, it's different based on what city you're in. But right now in Oakland, there is another one that's open. There's particular for undocumented workers here in Oakland.
And you're working with both of them then, because you're in Oakland, but you're also volunteering with the UndocuFund San Francisco?
Right. So the union is working. One of my coworkers who's working with the Oakland UndocuFund, the East Bay UndocuFund, is doing that part in the sense of making sure that there's funds, or there's other ways of getting funds to get more money into it. I started volunteering for the UndocuFund SF because from from what I've been informed through another comrade of mine, is that there's partners like these that you're showing, right? These are um, in Oakland that are sponsoring the UndocuFund. And Centro Legal de la Raza is the one that's managing the funds for it.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to get like foundations and give big money into this UndocuFund in particular, but the one in SF wasn't able to do that.
Right.
The SF UndocuFund SF is all being grassroots fundraised right now by individual volunteers.
Yeah, so you went where you felt there was more of a need.
Where it was more of a need, for sure, it was San Francisco, because, they had to, the organizations that are a part of the UndocuFund SF, like, literally had to make a whole call out to reel in volunteer fundraisers, and created like a whole training, right, on like how to just fundraise on your own, like who to call, how to make the ask, what are the goals, and then from there just checking in with the folks who like linked you in, right, into volunteer to fundraise. But from that training, that's when I got that, and SF is a lot more needed to fundraise for an UndocuFund.
You would think that they would have more success fundraising with businesses in San Francisco, because there's a lot more wealth, there's a lot more businesses there than in Oakland. But it's interesting that Oakland, maybe they just caught a lucky break teaming up with whatever organization, with the Centro Legal, and then that's why they were able to.
Yeah, it just goes to show what the businesses think about their workers in San Francisco.
And so you were telling me also, when we were talking about UndocuFund San Francisco, that you literally had people calling you every single day to see if you had heard of any update on any possible way to help them out.
Right. Yeah, I'll have because I'll be volunteering with the folks who make the Cure Cause. Well, here in Oakland, right, like I link up the workers that I'm organizing with to these funds, and those are the calls that I get back the most. And then from the workers that I used to organize with back when I used to organize with fast food workers, there's a couple of folks that went out to San Francisco, started working in San Francisco over the years, and I'll get calls from workers that I haven't seen like in a couple of years, just asking me where are resources at, where is there like a program to just pay part of a bill, or not even finding money, right, just to try to get a bill paid or try to get part of their rent paid, where unfortunately if there was some, they're closed by now, right? Mm-hmm. And there's only like one for here in the Bay Area that I've heard of so far, is an UndocuFund SF right now, and there's the UndocuFund for the East Bay.
What about at the state level? There aren't any organizations that you can point them to and say, here's a place, or here's a group of places that you can try that can provide some assistance?
Well, there is a state, there was a fund for the state level, right, for folks to apply to. I mean,
think it was 70 million, mm-hmm. Was it, or
around there? Yeah. It was a lot. It's a lot of money, but there's a couple of churches, right, that like partnered up with the state to be able to distribute that money. I mean, and I gave those numbers to the folks that were asking, right? But to this day, I asked them, have you gotten in touch with someone? What's going on? And they said no.
That's the fund that was giving.
They were not getting in touch.
Is that the fund that gives families $400 or $500?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
Important to point out that I think California may be the only state that I believe has provided that type of support.
One-time state-funded disaster relief assistance to undocumented adults who are ineligible for other forms of assistance, including assistance on the coronavirus relief and the CARES Act, right? So anyone that doesn't qualify for the CARES Act would qualify for the California one. But as you were saying, it sounds like there's a huge backlog, or I don't even know what the criteria is for.
It's probably a huge backlog, because the way that we're accepting applications was through phone calls. So I would imagine how many people will call that one number.
Yeah, and also in the grand scheme of things, if they're giving people $400, $500,
It's per family.
per family. Yeah, so it doesn't. It's not. It'll help, but the
Right.
lockdown. We've been in lockdown now for about 3 months. So
Right.
yeah,
And yeah, at best, folks owe maybe 2 months of rent if they
yeah.
could have paid the first month.
And so,
Maybe.
in addition to helping them with job protection, so they can have an opportunity to go back to their jobs when the economy does open up, are you also pointing them in a specific direction, or helping them yourself with rent protection, so that they don't get kicked out of the apartments where they live if they stop paying the rent? Or is that easier because that falls under the umbrella of like the state protections or city protections for rent?
Well, I think that in itself might have to be a fight too, in terms of the rent, um, because well, one because the what they have out here in the Bay Area, right? It's a moratorium for rent, but which means yeah they don't have to pay right now, but as soon as that moratorium is up, they'll have to pay what is owed. So it's not a rent forgiveness.
Right.
Um, and yeah, and I mean, and one thing here at least in Oakland, right, and in Los Angeles, there is a group. There's several groups that do work with tenants and do fight back and push back, on evictions, illegal evictions, or any illegal like raising of the rent that the landowners try to do on their tenants, right? To be able to fight back on that and make sure that folks keep where they're living at, either their home or their apartment. But yeah, I mean, and I think overall, like we just have to. That's the other thing too, right? That we can't think about it as a one like narrowed down campaign of just changing the workplace, because the workplace, getting money, all that affects everything else in your life, right? Which is providing food for family, right? Having insurance, being healthy, and also having a home, right? Having somewhere to be able to stay at. So yeah, I can't necessarily say that I could, make 100% solid plan on how to make sure that we could help keep folks from getting evicted or being homeless. But as long as we're together on all this, we stay communicated with each other in terms of like me and the committee, the lead workers who I'm organizing with, we could definitely work on it together, right, and push back as much as we can.
But it sounds like that's what I was saying earlier, that it sounds like, at least for now, rent is not it's a concern, but it's something that can be deferred, because for the most part the cities were quick to act and pass some type of protections, even if it was just for a few months.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard any stories about any small landlords trying to kick people out despite these protections, like putting pressure on them, especially if they're undocumented families?
I haven't heard anything myself. I mean, I do have some workers who I'm in touch with that, one worker in particular who is fighting a case against their landlord. She's being pushed out, trying to be pushed out, but it was put into a hold when the moratorium came up.
Okay, right. So this family was fighting them before.
But yeah,
before the moratorium.
Before COVID.
Yeah.
But that's a big issue because, well, and also I think part of the problem is that there are small town or people who own a couple of properties, and who depend on the rent payments in order to pay the mortgages. But I know here in LA, there's a concern for the city council, and I think that is finding that the right balance, right? Because there are a bunch of other corporate landlords who have took advantage of the last recession to buy a bunch of property, and obviously they have no connection to the community, so they are not as in a vulnerable position as somebody who maybe owns another home and perhaps does need at least some income to come in order to pay for the rent. But it just points out to the fact that I think we need a more global solution, whether it's at the state or, in this case, a city or state or federal level, that realizes that, you know what, like, it's going to take us a few months, if not a few years, to kind of get out of this um, financial and economic hole that we're in together. So, and I think if we can keep people in their homes, is better because there's less suffering, and it costs less to help them stay home versus trying to get them housed once they've been homeless. And there's so many things that I feel that just require a lot of leadership at at all levels. But I think this conversation to me is highlighting the fact that so much of that leadership falls on people like you, Samuel, who are out there trying to get people organized, trying to get them motivated, and keeping them engaged as all this happens. So it's truly a Herculean effort that you're doing.
And I think that
No, so
looking at this article right here, I think you're right in your earlier point, Samuel, that once these protections are lifted, that's when we're gonna see a lot of issues around people getting evicted from their places. 'Cause for example, just here in LA, this article is saying about 365,000 renter households in LA County are in imminent danger of eviction once the Judicial Council order housing evictions is lifted. So yeah, it's going to be a challenge. I think it's going to put a lot of pressure maybe in organizations to help these folks that are going to have to switch from trying to survive the day-to-day, trying to figure out where they're going to get money, if they're going to go back to work. And then once the country opens back up and then the cities decide that they're no longer going to provide these protections for renters, then that's when because rent, considering how expensive rent is, especially cities like San Francisco, LA, and Oakland, that's a lot of money for people, especially for people to have to cover that haven't been working. And I think that's why it's really important that you're volunteering in programs like UndocuFund San Francisco, because even though I think right now they're just helping people cover the costs of basic necessities like food, maybe transportation and so forth. I think these are going to be the funds that are also going to try to help people once the eviction restrictions are lifted. So why don't you tell us, like, if people listening to this podcast, if they want to help someone that's been listening to all this and says, I want to help out with either the organizing that you're doing or with the fundraising, what's the best way that they can do it?
Well, yeah, definitely the UndocuFund, right? Making sure that they folks could donate, right? And, ask people that they know themselves to donate. I know one effective way and quick way that helps me out in terms of like fundraising and getting more money, is asking folks to match what you've donated already, right? Like if I put in $50, into UndocuFund SF, I'll ask everyone that I'm passing it to, can you match me? Put in another 50, so that we could reach the goal that they have, and we give a lot more money to like the families that are in need, right?
Can you mention the goal briefly too? Because I don't see that here.
The goal, that's just a web page. You might have to go where it says, click where it says donate. I think the goal right now is 50K. So we're trying to reach. There should be a little like bar there, but they might have taken it out.
Yeah, I'm looking for the goal and to see if there's a progress as to how much money has been reached. It's similar to how Kickstarter or GoFundMe does it.
Right.
Do you know how much money they've raised so far? Because I know when we spoke a few days ago, you mentioned to me that the goal was 50,000. So I was curious to see how that's going.
So right now, from when I looked at it yesterday, from what I saw yesterday, they're at, they're a little over 13K.
Okay. And when is there a time frame they want to reach the 50K by when?
I think it's just as soon as we can get it. We're gonna be checking in. The dial thing says it's a little bit under over 10K. That's where they're at right now.
Okay.
We're gonna be checking in as the volunteers in about a week or so to see how we're doing. But I mean, I think the goal is to try to get it to get the 50K as soon as we can, as quick as we can, so we could just write. They could just write those checks or send it to the workers. And another thing, because I mentioned about rent, right, and about tenants. I do want to let y'all know there is one group in LA that I worked with before in the past that's done really dope ass work in terms of organizing with tenants, organizing with community. Their name is ACE. It's ACCE. Action.org.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the first one.
Pulling up their page right here.
Yeah, they're based in South Central. But yeah, they do dope work, like I said, right? Here, I could speak for here in Oakland, at least, the chapter. There's a chapter called Anti-Displacement chapter, and these are a group of tenants that focus mainly on fighting and pushing back against slumlords. And what they do is when they hear of someone being evicted, right, or illegally evicted, or even evicted in general, they really try to fight back, push hard. One way is by doing direct actions, which is going to landlords' homes and doing actions on the curbside, on the sidewalk of their house, and calling them out for, whatever messed up shit they're doing of the properties that they own. Also, just do very big, heavy campaigns to make sure that, folks don't get evicted or, don't get taken advantage of. But I would say, if anyone has any issues and wants to learn their rights as tenants, I would say that's a good spot to start off with, so you could get yourself informed.
Yeah, definitely valuable resources if people out there want to get involved and help out in any way. And as you were speaking just now, something else came into my mind, which is you mentioned helping people that are fighting evictions. What's the general knowledge that you see in people when it comes to understanding their rights as renters? Do you see that there's a pretty good understanding that they have rights, or do you find that there's a lot of ignorance and people don't really understand? And the reason why I ask is because I've heard from the immigrant community, I've heard crazy things like they'll say, well, if they kick you out of the apartment, they have to pay you. And I hear that a lot, at least enough that I've heard it in the Latino community that I think that there's just not a very good understanding of how the process works. And I think I've told them, I haven't looked into this myself, but I think what's going on is the renter knows that the landlord knows that there's renters' rights. So they offer the people a little bit of money to move out and not to try to, because they're effectively kicking them out. But they pay them, they give them some money, which is going to cost them a lot less than letting them stay for however long the rent protections gives them, so that people can leave. And so somehow the community has this distorted idea that, oh, well, if they kick us out, they have to give us money, which is at least
instead of it being a question of like, oh, hell no, how can I push back to not leave?
Exactly, yeah. And do you find that also up there, or is that just an LA thing?
I think that's an LA thing, because I'm hearing that the most too in LA. Because here it's like, here what I see the most is people like generally push back to stay, whether they know or don't know how to do that, But that seems to me that like first those are folks like general reaction to things is like, okay, how can I fucking push back? Like how can I, make sure that I could do something, try to do something to allow them to stay in their place where they're living at,
Yeah.
Because I rarely hear the fact that, oh, we're paying you out, we're paying you to like go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then because that in itself is like a pretty good victory, in terms of, I mean, it kind of depends, right? Because sometimes when I hear getting paid out for something, at least here in the Bay, that meant that they paid you, that they got you on the deposit, they found you in another spot, they got you the deposit on the other spot, and they fronted you like the first month paid, right, with some money still.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I haven't gotten that level of information from the people that I've spoken to about what getting paid out means, but I took it to mean that there was just some money that was given, like $2,000 or $3,000 to get out, and so people have this. Go ahead.
No, yeah, it could be, right? I think in these, when we're talking about like attendance, right, and like housing, like we gotta really think about it as a one by one case because, um, yeah, because a lot of folks think that like what you're describing in LA, right? It'll be cool because we'll get paid out, so we could go find another spot. And instead we could try to change the conversation. We're like, no, like, let's try to see if let's fight for the spot that you're at now, right? And if not, then they secure that whoever's kicking you out is going to secure you to have another spot, right, ready to go, and just for you to stay there.
Yeah, it might be something that happens enough here in LA that's how the
Mhm.
landlords approach it. That there's just like a general knowledge, some vague knowledge from
Right,
people
right.
that have that know people that were forced out of apartments. Because I remember the one older Mexican woman that I was talking to about this. She was saying, "Well, my friend, they when they moved out, they paid them, and so she was saying if I move out or if this other person moves out, then they have to pay us too." And I told her, I said, I don't. That's not how it works. I mean, someone's not gonna pay you to move out. I said, if they're paying you to move out, that's probably because they're trying to avoid you exercising your rights as a renter. So you should
Hmm.
be careful about that. I did try to educate them to let them know that that's not how it works. Although it is at least it is something, right? It's
Right,
it's a positive to get some money to move out. That's really not how it's
right, right,
supposed to work. So I was trying to educate
right.
them on that.
Yeah, I heard about that through. I mean, one of my uncles. That happened to one of my uncles. He got pushed out of his apartment, but they gave him money to go to another place.
And do you know how much it was? Do you know if it was commensurate with?
And I can't remember, but from what I do remember, when I was talking to my uncle about it, making it seem like it was enough for him to be able to get that other place
Okay,
lined up and be set,
so
not having
that's
to worry
that's like
about
that
looking
would
for
be
a
a month's
place.
worth of rent then, or
Uh,
maybe 2 months
at
at
least,
most.
at the very least.
But in reality, renters protection gives you protection for 6 months. That somebody has to give you a written notice, and then you have 6 months rent protection. At least here in LA.
Right.
So it still works out a lot better for the landlord to even pay to give them
Oh,
that
right.
much, right?
Right, right. Because like I said, like you don't know what's going on in each case, right? Like, one thing it could be that the building could be fucked up and they had to remodel and they're trying to scheme you with like a little bit of money when you could have gotten more. You
Right,
just don't know.
right.
But I think that's one of the benefits to going to these groups, because at the very least, if you're not trying to get involved, like you can hear about your rights, right? You
Hmm.
can somewhere where they won't charge you. They'll just talk to you or like refer to you to like learn more about your rights as a tenant.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think some of those rights are only applied to folks who are in a rent stabilized property as
Hmm.
well.
Right, because I know one thing that's different here in Oakland, right? Because in Oakland there is a rent control, some form of rent control, right? But it doesn't apply to like single family like homes, So I live in a home right now, and the rent control does not apply to me. But if I lived in an apartment building that was built before '95, then I have rent control.
Right.
But if it's an apartment building that was built after the '90s, then you don't have shit, you know.
Well, you get some
Uh,
basic renter protections, but
it's
not.
some basics, yeah, yeah, it's just like the basics. Um, so yeah, those are just the little details, right? Like I don't know exactly what it is like in LA. Like, is it every house or is it, just something more specific, of who applies under rent control or who can have rent control?
Hmm.
Um, But I think at least with this group, like it's a good start, right? And if you do want to get involved, one of the other things that I really like about this org is that it's a self-sustained org, right? They don't take any money from major corporations. They don't take any money from banks, right? Because that's who they fight in the end of the day too, right? They fight banks who are trying to foreclose on people's homes.
Well,
Um,
maybe they should.
and
Maybe they should. Sorry to interrupt you. Maybe they should take the bank's money and then keep fighting against them.
Well, and I'm just saying, like, they don't take it if they want to offer it. I'm not saying that banks are offering money neither, right? Because
Yeah.
they know who their enemy is. Um, but the way they self-sustain is by having a membership that pays $10 a month,
Right.
um, right? And that's how they're able to sustain, have an office, like have organizers, tenant organizers, and community organizers, right, to be able to create these groups of tenants to be able to fight back.
Yeah, definitely. And look, there's a lot here. There's a lot more to discuss here. And I know that you have a hard stop like pretty soon. So I want to be mindful of your time. But I want to thank you, first of all, Samuel, for coming on the show and educating us in this area, because I feel like a lot of the times when we talk about these things, it's like kind of vague because we're not at the ground level like you are. So thank you for coming on and providing that level of detail. I think it's really important to hear that.
No, for sure. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I mean, shit, we're learning every day, you know, like all this that I'm mentioning right now too, like organizing during a pandemic, like all this is new terrain for us, for me too, and as a labor organizer, because like I said, most of the work we do is, you know, going to people's houses or workplaces, and right now I can only be doing phone calls and video calls. So it's been good. It's been good though, because, you know, it goes to show that, you know, El Pueblo is there. They still have that fire in their belly. They want to keep fighting, especially now. And, you know, I just want to be there to make sure we're directed in a really good place to have them take lead of their own campaign, you know? Yeah,
definitely. And by the way, we'd love to have you back on the show again at some point so that we can continue the conversation.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, let me know. I'm down.
Eduardo, any last?
No, also appreciating the conversation today. Thank you, Samuel, for sharing your story and your great, amazing work with us. I also hope you have the opportunity to take care of yourself and also disconnect when you have an opportunity. But yeah, I mean, I think the fact is that El Pueblo Unido jamás será vencido. So
that's right.
I think we continue to work towards making sure that more of our people, more of us, are empowered and have the ability to pursue pursue happiness and opportunity here in our country and across the world too, because it's a global desire that we all have.
Good stuff, guys. So Eduardo, you want to wrap us up with the social media? How people can get in touch with us?
So follow us on Instagram, on the gram at Brown Perspective, and also you can like us on YouTube, follow us, comment, and help get the word out.
Está. All right, guys. Thanks for the chat.
Thank you.